Bilingual Redditors, what's the funniest thing you've overheard from someone who didn't think you'd understand them? I speak Maltese and English. When I visited Malta, my waiter at the hotel restaurant said something to another about how stupid Americans are when I asked where the bathrooms were. He turned pale as a ghost when I responded in Maltese that generalizing isn't a very nice thing to do. This isn't my story, but I was there and ended up hearing what was spoken. My stepsister speaks both Spanish and English. We were in a very small, packed nail salon getting our nails done when a couple behind us started speaking in Spanish. I had no clue what they were saying, but my stepsister had the "WTF am I hearing?" look on her face. She wasn't trying to listen in, but they were literally right behind us and speaking rather loudly. This went on for a few minutes, my stepsister's face getting more and more shocked. She'd had pulled out her phone and dialed 911 at one point, but she was speaking softly and I couldn't hear her for sure over the Spanish speaking duo. Few more minutes passed, and the female of this duo asked something to the male of the duo, which he answered in a "I dunno." My stepsister answered in Spanish, and the looks on their face were priceless. Duo started begging for something in Spanish to my stepsister. When the cops walked in, duo were arrested, and when I finally got the chance to ask what the hell happened, my stepsister told me they were talking about how they robbed the local drugstore a few nights ago. It was big news in our little town at the time, as there were no leads or anything. It was extremely bizarre. At my pool where our lifeguard, a Chinese family, comes in every day, they were planning on either eating a baby or a hamburger. It's a tough language. My mother is fluent in Russian. When she was younger, she was at a liquor store and two guys were very obviously checking her out. In Russian, they were saying, "I bet she likes this. I bet she would do this, etc." She turned around and said in Russian, "I bet she speaks Russian." They were too shocked to speak after that. I'm a black guy living in a large black neighborhood in a major metropolitan area in the US. And people who didn't know the area would think it was pretty bad. One day my sister sent me to the Asian-owned beauty supply store to buy her a comb and hairspray. I walk in the store and the owner doesn't even make eye contact. She proceeds to speak with her husband in Chinese while me and the other patrons peruse the store. Little does she know what I minored in Chinese at a pretty good school. Spent years in Shanghai and am very fluent in the language. As I walk I hear what roughly translates to "I wish these niggas would hurry up and leave the store." I go off, in English of course, and tell them that they shouldn't be in this neighborhood if they don't like black people. The other patrons weren't as nice. I know this isn't haha funny, but it was some damn good justice. Edit. In 95% of academia and business, if you say that you speak Chinese, people will assume you speak Mandarin. I'm well aware that there are different dialects. Edit 2. It was late and spelling is not my forte. I worked at a summer camp last summer and none of my kids I was in charge of knew that I spoke Spanish. About 5-30 of them also did. One day 3 14-year-old girls were talking about me in Spanish, about what they wanted to do to me sexually. I jokingly said to them in English, "You'd better not be talking about me." They took it as a joke and everyone laughed it off. Then on the last day of camp, when we allowed them to ask us slightly more personal questions about ourselves, someone asked for a random fact that they didn't know. I looked over to the 3 girls and calmly said, "I speak fluent Spanish. It's in fact my first language." I have never seen a more horrified look on someone's face. Edit. Made it a bit more clear. Also, I was a 16-year-old guy at the time. When I was a small child, my parents and I went to a basin, which is a ski mountain in Colorado. While we were eating lunch, a guy with a mohawk walked past our table and in French my parents snarkily asked whether we liked his hair or not, while giving the impression that they weren't too fond of it. The guy turned around and in French responded with, "Yeah, it's not for everyone." Edit. I'm not sure if it was Glenn Plake because I was probably around 6 years old when this happened, but that would be so sick. 2 Hispanic guys came up to order food from me. I work as a cashier at a fast food joint, and the one dude said that he bets the food here tastes worse than his wife's V. It took all my willpower not to laugh. I work for a non-profit that helps people with disabilities get jobs. We had a quarterly meeting for a client who was deaf and mentally retarded, and the interpreter had cancelled last minute. Knowing a bit of sign, I was elected to interpret the meeting. I came in and explained to her that I knew a little sign and I was going to do my best to interpret for her. She rolled her eyes and signed to no one in particular. Oh duck. Back when I was in high school we were forced to sell cookie dough for our American football team. I had finished selling the required amount and was just walking with my friend while he finished up his. Some background. I speak 3 languages. English, Spanish and Turkish, and plan on taking Norwegian and Arabic next year in university. We go up to this one house and a man comes out. He goes through the spiel and part of the way through the man starts screaming no speak the English. I Hispanic not despite the fact that he was clearly Middle Eastern Southern European. I ask him if he wants to buy anything in Spanish. Then he switches over to Turkish and I ask the same thing. After that, he just looks at me and says in clear English, "Duck you," before slamming the door in our faces. I'm white and I speak Chinese. I moved into a place where the landlord and landlady were Chinese and several things in the house needed replacing and fixing. Walls painted, deck fixed, etc. They didn't know I spoke Mandarin. The landlady came in the day after move-in with the fix-it man, who was also Chinese, but spoke not a word of English. She showed him around the house and told him in Chinese what he should fix, but also what he should not fix. Like, let this be. That's not that important. This doesn't have to be done. etc. I followed them around at hearing distance until she left. Then as soon as she was gone, I went up to the guy and told him in Chinese that I didn't give a damn what she had said, and everything that she said not to do, I wanted done. And I wanted it done today. Guy was speechless and I got my way. I don't often have a win, but there was definitely one. Look at the fat kid eat his hamburger. 2 years of Spanish has taught me a lot. I speak Japanese and English, and one time I had an Italian friend over at my house with some other Japanese company. When we all went in for a toast, my Italian friend said chin chin, which is customary to say before a toast in Italy. However, it means D in Japanese and even my 87-year-old grandfather had a huge laugh. I speak English, French and Greek fluently, so I can share 2 personal experiences. I remember one time I went on vacation to Montreal and asked for directions in English, and the taxi driver, a francophone, started saying in French how Anglophones are stupid and should go back to Toronto. I responded in French how I'm from Detroit and he was surprised. Another time, in Detroit, a man in Greek was helplessly asking everyone for directions in very bad English, and nobody would aid him. I heard him tell his wife in Greek HW he needed to find the local hospital to visit his sick granddaughter. So, in Greek, I helped him reach his destination. My parents are Brazilian and so I grew up speaking Portuguese and English. In college I meet people who are also Brazilian but actually from there. The difference is that I am not stopped for extra screening for the TSA but they are. So, I meet the Brazilians at a party and they're all "oh nice to meet you" blah 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 small talk. Then they turned to each other thinking I wasn't actually Brazilian and was just pulling summit and said this guy thinks he's Brazilian. Look at him. White. Chubby. No accent at all. No way this guy's Brazilian. I replied in perfect Brazilian Portuguese dialect. You know when someone says they're Brazilian, it's not smart to start talking it in their native tongue within earshot. I overheard a guy and a girl arguing over who had shat on the bathroom floor in their share house. Well, I speak Spanish and English. I'm also a 6'5" black guy who towers over a lot of people and is pretty fit. I was working in a Spanish neighborhood, and when I asked for directions to some place, I heard a couple guys call me a stupid black. Obviously they didn't believe that I could speak Spanish. So when I turned and said you shouldn't say things like that, you don't know who's going to overreact and crush your tiny skull. All the while I was crushing my Coke can. They dispersed quickly after that. 2 guys discussing my boobs. I asked them to refrain from discussing my breasts and they both turned the color of a tomato. D. Next to 2 people speaking Spanish and with a female friend of mine. Them. In Spanish. Why is that girl with that guy? She's way too pretty for him. Me. Also in Spanish. I can understand you. They turned bright red and left. My friend had no idea what happened until I told her, and she thought it was hilarious. Not me. But when I was in middle school, this group of 3 or 4 kids in my class would always talk in Creole, and nobody else in the class had any idea what they were saying. The teacher repeatedly asked them to stop, since they could be saying something against the rules, but they just ignored her. This went on for weeks. Then one day, this guy comes in and sits in a chair in the corner of the room. Someone asks who he is, and he says he's just an assistant observing for the day. Eventually, the kids start talking in Creole again. After a few minutes, the assistant guy comes over and sits down next to their desks and moves in on their little huddle and goes, "Yes, ID is huge and no, the cute teacher ain't gonna suck yours." Their eyes went huge. Then he goes, "And by the way, I'm your new English teacher." And y'all got detention with me. After college, my very white, very dorky looking friend spent about 6 years in Japan and became fluent, married a Japanese girl, brought her back to the States, etc. He and I swing by a yogurt place after going to a hockey game. We're standing in line with our cups behind 2 Japanese guys, when my friend starts getting quiet and listening to them laugh and talk quietly. He then told me to hold his yogurt cup, and he walks over to the girl who'd walked in with the 2 guys. She was sitting quietly, looking at her phone, at a table behind us. I see my friend start talking to her in Japanese. Her eyes get huge, and she freaks out. The guys have noticed by now, and long story short, I become the referee in a soon-to-be fight between 4 people yelling in Japanese at each other. The girl is crying and leaves. One guy pushed my friend, but ended up leaving after the girl, and when the manager came out, I just looked at my friend like, WTF was that? The one guy was apparently her boyfriend and was talking to the other guy about cheating on the girl. She was an idiot. He was going to dump her, etc. My friend just felt sorry for her and told her what a bag she was with. Was in Paris on business buying a subway ticket. Russian couple with a young son were attempting to use the same style red ticket box that I was, automated. They were somewhat flustered because there was no Cyrillic language option, so they were just standing there ranting about how bad the French sucked. I haven't heard a string of good cussing like that since I lived with my parents more than a decade ago and almost busted a gut laughing. The father looks at his wife and says, "I think that daddy is laughing at us." Basically called me a bitch cunt prostitute. Slapped on the native accent and told him I overheard what stop their hotel was at and would gladly find their room if I got drunk enough. The wife yelped, "We're an angry people." I'm not bilingual, but when I was 16 I worked in a Chinese restaurant after school washing dishes. They had 2 Mexicans that did all the prep work. They didn't speak a word of English and were always talking back and forth in their native tongue. Every time one of the waitress, hot high school girls, would walk past they would say something quietly to each other and then laugh. It really freaked some of the girls out. One day we had a new girl that my 16-year-old self was trying desperately to impress. So I formulated a plan to get the Mexicans to stop their creepiness. I just did my normal thing, scrubbing those woks and waiting until new chick walked by. Almost on cue the Mexicans made their little remarks to each other. I just started laughing hysterically and turned around and stared the one closest to me right in the eye. They never said a word around the waitresses again. New chick thought I was really nice and ended up giving me a really nice handy J a couple weeks later. TLDR got a hand job because I pretended to understand perverted Mexicans. I speak French, and most French conversations between people my age are basically the equivalent of "you what mate, I'll wreck you." My co-worker actually, she was cashing this Arabic couple out and this woman said to her husband in Arabic, "She looks fat, she should go exercise more." My co-worker could understand what she was saying, but didn't show it. As they were leaving, she said, "Have a nice day" in Arabic. I saw this all go down, and the looks on their faces as it dawned on them, priceless. I overheard the people at the checkout register speaking in Spanish and judging me for having my 18-month-old nephew with me as I was grocery shopping for my mom. I'm 16. They thought he was my child and talked about how itty of a kid I must have been, but positively remarked on how I was trying to raise him at least. Come to think of it, I got a lot of judgmental looks from just random people. I was with my girlfriend and her friend, both half Asian. I'm white, when two Chinese people at the next table across started whispering somewhat inappropriately about the girls I was with. One hushed the other one, who replied, "Don't worry, they are Hungsu, mixed blood, so they can't speak Chinese." I fired back in fluent Mandarin, "No, but I can." Needless to say, they were embarrassed, but they spent the next 5 minutes telling me how pretty my girlfriend was, so I didn't mind. I was working at a popular theme park and this French couple on their honeymoon came up to my register, so I started ringing them up. I offered my typical cheery, "Hi, how are you doing today?" to be polite and to test the extent to which I would have to mime and point rather than speak during the transaction. They smiled but didn't respond, so I figured they didn't really speak a lot of English. They also must have figured that I didn't really speak a lot of French, because they started telling each other exactly what they were going to do to the other when they got back to the hotel room. They seemed to be in for a fun night. I was on a cruise last year. I was in the elevator with these grandmas. Then they started to say stuff about me in Russian. Stuff along the lines, "I remember the days guys like that wanted to hop into my crotch basket." I smiled and said as I was walking out the elevator, "Those days have yet to pass," in Russian. They stared at me and as I was walking away I heard them start giggling as the elevator doors were closing. The smoothest I have ever been and will ever be. Unfortunately, it was like being the best poet on the bowling team. You don't tell your friends you're the best poet on the bowling team. Not me, but it is a funny story. So there was this exchange student from Iceland, population about 300,000 in the US. And since he was pretty good at playing football, not American football, he ends up on the school team. In one match the referee blows his whistle and shows him the yellow card for a foul. He is not happy and starts cursing the referee, using every swear word known to man. In Icelandic, the referee just smiles and after he finally stops, calmly shows him the red card and says in perfect Icelandic, "I spent 10 years at the US Naval Air Station at Keflavik. Never underestimate the damn Marines. They can be found anywhere." My Costa Rican friend and his parents forgot that I am in Spanish 5 at my school and had a whole conversation about how so many Americans are fat and poor. It was actually pretty funny. Studied abroad in Italy. Most people thought I was a tourist. Instead of actually studying Italian for 4 hours per day for 6 months. Ended up walking a girl home one night who spoke English quite well, and her friends, all Italian, kept taunting her and saying, "Are you going to duck the American?" To which I could completely understand, and responded with, "Would you like to join?" The looks on their faces was incredible. It went okay. I worked on a construction site in high school with a bunch of Hispanics. My Spanish was broken at best, but I could always understand it better than I spoke. Some of the gems I overheard included me sitting on a bench, "Is he in the NBA or something?" and me eating a sandwich for lunch and some mayo drips down. "Look, he's bleeding." I wish I remembered more, but those were pretty hilarious. They found me out after I laughed at one of their jokes making fun of the site foreman. Working in Quebec French. 2 dudes were calling me La Tit Anglaise Roux, the little English redhead, and one asked the other if they thought the carpet matched the drapes. I responded in French that neither would be worthy of finding out, and that they were both douches, explaining what that meant in English. Douche means shower in French. Edit. Guys, I'm just sharing a story like everyone else. It never implied I have problems with the French. These were 2 dude. Happen to be French. I love La Belle Province, and mean not to insult her. I love Quebec, and have many Franco friends. We teach each other the slang in our languages by meeting in the middle and have very interesting conversations about our cultures, history, politics, etc. I am sorry to have initiated this thread that lead to so much Quebec bashing. I don't think it has as much to do with Quebec as it did with them being douches. There are assholes everywhere, in every corner of the globe, just as there are nice PPL worldwide. Let's be friends, everyone. I just wanted to tell a funny story. Edit 2. And D-Weed on this thread is incessantly harassing me to show him pictures of me. One of my first posts on Reddit. Probably won't again. Good job. No tears, only dreams. You are truly pathetic. Reverse situation. Walking on the streets in Japan. My buddy said to me in English, "Hey man, check out that hot girl with the roses." Bet she's going to meet her girlfriend. So we joked a little about the possibility of that. Turns out she was heading to the same store as us, and when we got there, she met her female friend with a big hug and presented her with the flowers, saying something in Japanese. Then she looked at us and winked. We were busted. Bit of an awkward laugh followed by she just laughed at us. Now that I think about it, it probably would have been a great icebreaker and we could have probably talked to her. 10 years too late, I guess. Haha. My aunt had to listen to her rich roommate's parents yell at her in French on their way to dinner. Something along the lines of, how could you go to college with these stupid Americans? We are way better than these people. These are the people that should be serving us dinner. This went on for a good long while. And when they got to the restaurant it didn't stop. They were insulting anyone and everyone around them, just for being poor, middle class, and American. Near the end of dinner, my aunt leaned toward the obnoxious mother and just pointed and said, "Can you pass the salt?" in French. Their faces went white and they apologized 1,000 times. Meanwhile their daughter was killing herself laughing. I had a Russian foreign exchange student live with my family while I was in junior high. He was a senior. He always taught me the swear words and a few other real phrases and insults. One day I overheard a Russian man at a convenience store call the clerk a fat American itch in Russian. I can't remember what it is anymore, but I told him, in Russian, "Sir, duck yourself." Dumbass mother ducking Russians. I felt super terrible. But when I explained what happened, Nico told me I did exactly what I should have. And he snuck me my very first horrible vodka that same night. TLDR got vodka from a Russian for being a D to another Russian. I'm Caucasian, but I grew up in China and speak Mandarin fluently. There's a hole in the wall Chinese restaurant behind my apartment that I like to go to. I went there one night and there was a particular douche of an individual in front of me being an absolute arsehole to the lady taking his order. She was smiling and staying nice to him the whole time, and then casually walked back into the kitchen to give the chefs the man's order. When she walks back outside of the swinging door towards the register to take my order, I see her poke her head back in the kitchen and overhear, "Oh yeah," and spit in this mother ducker's food for me. Then without skipping a beat smiles and comes up and takes my order. People who speak Spanish don't know their language is easy to learn and should probably stop using it to veil it talking. Here goes. When I was a youngin, 19 years old, I used to be the manager at a thrift store where 80% of the clientele are strictly Spanish speaking. Being the manager, I was also the only one at the register. This one time I had acquired a line and had to have someone help me with getting the line down. The person I asked to help was quite irate because the customers had left her section of the store in a very aesthetically unpleasing manner. When she got there to help, the customer at the time was one of the 20%, or so the employee thought, and was standing right in front of me. The employee, being quite furious, said, "Pinch gringo me dijo un madrero. Stupid white girl left me a mess." I told her to quiet down because there was a possibility that she understood. The employee then said, "Pinch idiota no sabe nada. Stupid idiot doesn't know anything." After we were done, the customer then said, "Intended to do logdigist. I understood everything you just said." The employee's face turned the most beautiful crimson red I have ever seen. And I laughed for a solid 5 minutes. No exaggeration. To this day she never lives it down. I'm from Morocco and I speak Arabic and English. I got to a new school in Scotland and I didn't speak much when I got there. A girl infant asks a friend with a straight face, "Morocco is in Africa, right?" "Yeah." "Then why is the new girl white?" I had to keep myself from falling to the ground in a fit of laughter. Probably the time at work I was serving a few French guys. They were talking about how hot they thought I was and asking if I could speak French. I pretended I didn't know what they were saying and they continued. Got a great tip from them. I was in the front row at the main stage for Sasquatch Festival this year, and some girls from Alberta behind me were speaking in French. I'm from BC, about how someone's knee was wedged between their butt cheeks. I chuckled. Guy at the car wash called me a payaso, a clown in Spanish. I told him chingati, cabron. It's Spanish, not ducking Swahili, dude. Two Hispanic girls talking about how cute I am and what I could do to them at Chipotle. I had been working out for over a year at that point and was still pretty down on my appearance. It was the best confidence builder ever. Edit. To those wondering. No, I did not approach either girl. I had a GF at the time, soon to be my wife in 2 weeks. This made me feel much more deserving of her. Since like most relationships, I have no idea what she sees in me. I overheard a couple talking about holding their farts in at Applebee's, in sign language. I'm fluent in ASL. I was out with my friend, in California, and I heard two girls speaking in my totally not common language. So automatically I looked at them, trying to hear what they were talking about, when one of the girls noticed and told her friend that some girl was creepily staring at them. Setting: Japanese grocery store. Kid: in Japanese, mommy, why is a foreigner in here? Twist: this was a Japanese grocery store in Toronto. Side note: Japanese people use their word for foreigner to describe non-Japanese people even when they're in a country in which they're the foreigner. Maybe others do this too. I was in KW registered sign Beck, and two KW registered sign B registered sign Kois girls kept looking at me and giggling, and I overheard them say how gay I apparently looked. I responded in perfect French that even if I was, at least I wasn't a whore. Their expressions were priceless and my friends nearly pissed themselves laughing. I go to a private university attended by a lot of wealthy white kids. The Spanish sandwich makers in the cafeteria always gossip about the prissy, white itches that order healthy food. I was in Paris last year. I walked into a boulangerie, bakery, and ordered a chicken panini. As I was waiting, I overheard this conversation between the lady who served me and her co-worker. Do you think he is single? Who? The Australian man. Me. I'm serving. Forget it, Ariel. He doesn't find you attractive. When Ariel came back with my panini, I gave her a €10 note with my number on it and walked out the door. Edit. I was in the country for only one more day afterwards and I did not receive a call from her. A German man and his friend were rating the women at the restaurant I was eating at in Nick on a scale of 1-5 in terms of attractiveness. I knew enough to pick up some words here and there, but the pointing followed by a number sealed it for me. One would point to a beautiful woman and the other would say funf. Meanwhile, the average bartender only got a dry A, Zweddy, in response. I speak Latin so no one understands me when I curse at them. :